I'm Eric, as usual, for Gearhead Daily. And, if this is something that you like, hey, subscribe, like, comment in the below. Make sure you feed that pesky algorithm that YouTube keeps changing. So today, I want to show you how to make, or at least how I do it anyway, perfect inlays every single time, especially in tight corners. That's always the big thing. So I've done a lot of research, and I have done a lot of fiddling with my CNC machine, doing a lot of tests, and finding out the best way for you to do inlays that are not only good looking but strong as well, especially ones that are going to be used for cutting boards that have food on them. You need to make sure that they're going to be safe. So I did a lot of the work for you, so come with me and I'm going to show you what I did. And just to kind of show you what this can potentially look like, right? These are all cut out with the CNC, and we'll get some nice beauty shots, some glamour shots. We have nice sharp points, uniform all the way across. Looks quite good. So this is going to be a very hefty cutting board when all said and done, and this is very solid. There is no hollowness underneath any of these pieces. Alright, so let's start here, and this is your inlay, and we're going to talk about depths and also how to cut these and then using the software to do this. So these are my experiments, and these are the numbers that I used, and I did a bunch of things to figure out kind of how this would look and how well each one did. So I just did a different pattern just so that I could kind of keep them all straight. But I've got my cutaways here. And how these numbers look are, this is the depth of cut, so this one's 0.3. This would be our height from the very beginning, and then the depth of our cut on our reciprocal piece, which would be this piece here. So that's what these numbers mean. So this one right here is 0.3, so this is 0.3 of an inch deep, and then there is no top depth taken from the top, and this will make sense in the software section here in just a second. So I'll bring that up. But this is how this looks. Okay, so I took a cutaway section, and if you were to have zero focus, there we go. So if you have zero depth to start with, then your inlay will not fit. Okay, that's definitely not going to work. Okay, so that part is out. The star here that I did, this is 0.2 of an inch deep, and this is a starting depth at 0.1 and then an ending depth at also 0.1. So we can see kind of how this looks. Hopefully we'll focus. There we go. And this one, not too bad. There's a small gap here at the bottom. Hopefully everybody can kind of see that small gap. There is a gap down there. It's not too bad. Actually, so this one's not too bad, and you can kind of see how much room you've got here. So one way to read this is how deep it's going to go, and this is how much left is going to be left over between this gap to this gap here. So how much room you're going to have at the very bottom. This one is kind of your typical one. This is the one actually I got straight from Vectric, which is the software I use. I use Vectric Aspire. You can use pretty much any software. They're pretty profound nowadays. But here's what they tell you. They tell you 0.3 deep, 1/10 starting depth, and then 0.2 of a finished depth. And here's the issue I have with it. Look at the gap this leaves. If you're doing cutting boards, this leaves a huge gap underneath, which allows for moisture to get in there and for food and all sorts of other junk. Just over time, stuff might loosen up, you never know, but you do not want to get moisture under there because wood soaks up, and it does happen from time to time. So this is not good. This is too much of a gap. Okay, this gap is way too wide. And so we need to close this gap up a bit. So 1/10 starting depth with a 2/10 overall depth, not good. Okay, this might be fine, so you can kind of see how much left you've got. So you've kind of got this big gap if this wants to ever focus. Come on, focus, you. Yeah, I can't say the AVE line, but anyway, you can see there's a pretty big gap there. Now, I had to redo this one just because it didn't quite cut right. But here is the one that I found. I can't take credit for it. Somebody else did this. And I'll link in below. I cannot remember his name, but he does CNC work. So credit to him. He found this out. So what he did is he did a much higher depth of cut in the beginning and then a much lower final depth. So, and this is what this looks like. And this one is pretty darn good. This leaves you just a smidge, and hopefully you can see the smidge here of room for glue. And then just barely, if it ever wants to focus, because that's always a problem, if you can just barely see the gap here, okay? And what this is 0.11 total depth, and then 0.09 starting depth, and then a final depth on your male piece. Okay, that's what these two numbers mean. Okay, so this is the one that works best for me, and then because you get a little bit of a gap there, and then when you put glue in there, the wood will expand and close that gap up, creating a very tight and a non-hollow sound when you knock on it with your finger or something. So it keeps a very tight deal. Now the other thing that you're going to run into is issues with your software. And your software is, remember, we are using round objects to try and make sharp corners. And what will happen often is you will get these little relief cuts because, again, we're using a round object to try and make a very sharp angle. And that doesn't, so there's a way to avoid this and then get something like this. Okay? And I'm going to show you how to do that in the software. And yeah, let's jump into that now. And let's just create a very small kind of 5x5. It's kind of irrelevant for what we're doing just because we're doing a test, but I just used it like the center position is fine for now. So let's go ahead and make a complex shape. And stars are fairly complex shapes. And, you know, to get a crisp straight line star, what I found that outer radius is about 0.45, and then the inner radius is 38%. And that gives a very kind of complex shape, but also a very straight line. What I like to think of when I think of stars, I think of stars as being very straight lines across. So let's just go with that. Now, to illustrate a couple issues that are going to come up, I'm just going to create this, but I'm going to rotate it so I can kind of talk about a point later. So now that we've got our shape, the easiest thing that we're going to do is we're going to go right over, and conventional wisdom is going to tell you to use a V-carve, and if you listen to Vectric, they're going to tell you all sorts of numbers, and they're going to tell you that you need to do 0.3 of an inch, and that start depth needs to be, you know, all sorts of numbers, and I'm here to tell you you don't need to do that. And as a matter of fact, I wouldn't listen to them when it comes to this because to think about it, the easiest way to think about this is your start depth when it comes to the pocket or female end of things doesn't matter. You just put it at 0. Start depth is always 0. The flat depth is going to be how deep that pocket goes, and how deep you want it is really up to you. I don't go any lower than a tenth, or any shallower than 1/10 of an inch. I usually go to between 2 and 3/10 just because I'm doing a lot of things that get used, and a lot of the cutting boards and things that I do that have intricate shapes need to be resurfaced over time. They're going to get used, and they're going to get, you know, hopefully need to be resurfaced because that means they're getting used. And when you resurface things, you're taking away material. And, you know, the kind of way I like to do it is I'll do 0.2. That's kind of the easiest way to do it. That gives us plenty of depth and many resurfacings of the top. So the conventional wisdom that you'll hear from most places is, oh, you need a V-bit to do this. And you can if you want to. I will show you kind of the issue with that as soon as we render this, and we'll go ahead and push play. And the issue that I have with this is, if you notice, the shape of this is not really flat. It's actually more kind of concave or convex. I guess I always mistake those two. But basically, you have a very deep part here in the middle, and then a very shallow part here up at the points. And when you go back to sand this, what will happen is your star will start to shrink this way because it's very, very thin up here, but very deep over here. I'm going to show you a better way to do this, okay? And the better way to do this is to use a better tool. Okay, so the better tool in this case is going to be an Amana tool that I found, and it's the 46280. I'll put a link in the description to do this. And so we're just going to change that tool. And what this is a very sharp, straight up and down tool with a very, very small taper, a 6.2 degree taper to it. So it's almost straight up and down, but it does have a taper, so it allows you to fit some things in there. And you can already see, just even by the toolpath preview, that it's going to look different. So we'll back up just a tad, reset the preview, and this works for very, very tiny details too. So don't worry, you're going to lose any detail because of you're using a V-carve or whatever. Actually, this actually works a ton better. So let's go ahead and hit play, and I'll show you what I mean. Now you see the taper is very, very subtle, but you can see it. You can see the shadow that's created. It's a very subtle taper, but it's very, very sharp, and will have a very positive click when you put your positive piece in here. Okay, so moving on, there's our pocket. We've got our V-carve, and we should just probably rename this just so we'll call this the negative. Okay, so just so we keep everything straight. Of course, gotta save it first. That's the important part. There we go. Okay, so moving on to the next piece. What we're going to do is we're going to create our positive end, or our male end of things. So we're going to take our object and we're going to copy to a new layer. This new layer, we'll just call it the positive layer. Also helps to spell correctly. And we're going to turn off that first layer so we don't have to look at it anymore. This is kind of the important piece. Get in the habit, even if you have symmetrical objects, is to get in the habit of always flipping the object. You're going to need to flip it horizontally, okay, just like that, so that when you book match, you're taking a piece, flipping it over so that it matches the size and shape that you are doing. I have sadly run into the issue where I thought I was doing everything right, everything carved out, and realized I did not create the reciprocal piece. I carved it as if they were both on the same plane, and that just didn't work. Okay, so what we need to do is now we need to create a boundary for this, and you can do it by creating a circle or a square. Some people do both. That's fine too. But one of my favorite ways of doing this is, if we remove that, is to do an offset of 3/10 of an inch. You have to select the object first. That is the rule. And now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be carving out this area inside of here. That's why we create the boundary. The software looks for the boundaries, and this is the inner boundary, this is the outer boundary, and then it carves everything out this way. Okay? Now, again, conventional wisdom is going to tell you that you need to do a V-carve path for this. And so we'll, again, use a clearance tool to kind of help us out. End mill is fine. And so here's kind of the issue that we're going to find. Now, when it comes to our numbers, we did 0.2. And what I like to do with 0.2 is I'll do 0.18. So start depth, how deep is it going to go into our pocket? And then the flat depth is how much room at the very bottom is going to be there. And so remember, it has to equal 0.2. That's our number. If you do 0.3, it's got to equal 0.3, okay? So these two numbers together have to equal that. So I'm going to do 0.02, which gives me enough of a glue line at the bottom to where with wood expansion, what's going to happen is those two wood pieces are going to expand and touch each other and create a very positive feeling at the very end. Now, because I do a lot of cutting boards and that sort of thing, I cannot have any hollow pieces, because if there's hollow pieces, what will happen is the water and moisture will get under there, fester, and who knows what sort of junk will grow under there. Okay, so that's the problem. So if you really want a very, very positive setting, when you set in your inlays, that's what you want to do. You want to make it sure that it's as tight to the bottom and to the sides as possible. Now, I've already spotted an issue. Like I said, this is conventional wisdom that you're going to find over on Vectric's website or some other places that they're going to tell you what to do. I've already can see an issue, and these little blue lines here, the toolpath lines, are going to indicate that we're going to have a problem. So let's just go ahead and play this, and you'll see the issue. And I showed you this earlier. You see how it kind of digs into the sides. You got sharp sides, and that's fine. And again, you see the taper, and that's all well and good. But the issue is you've got these little cutouts, and you will see this when you inlay your positive piece to your negative piece, and it looks frankly terrible. It looks amateur hour because your tool path is trying to get into that corner, but because it's a round object, it can't make a square corner. So there's a better way to do this. And the better way to do this, let's just get rid of that. Get rid of this nonsense. We're just going to delete this. Then we're going to delete this and get rid of it out of my sight. You disgust me. So, all right, so the easiest way to do this and the cleanest way I've ever found to get especially really sharp corners inside here is to do a pocket tool path instead of a V-carve. I know they're going to tell you do V-carves for both of them. I'm here to tell you, if you really want crisp lines, you don't do it, okay? So again, we need to make sure that these numbers equal 0.2. So in this case, we use 0.18 and 0.02. Those were the two numbers that we used. We used the same tool. Make sure you use the same tool when you are carving in and out. Doesn't matter positive or negative. It has to be the same tool. Otherwise, it's going to be a challenge to get them together. I mean, as long as the architecture is the same. So, as long as it's got a 90-degree V-bit or something, whatever you're using. Again, I like using these tapered ball nose. I'll put a link in the description just because I like them. Yes, they're not cheap. However, they create such crisp lines and very deep positive inlays that it's worth the cost. So we're going to go ahead and calculate that. And remember, what we saw earlier is these little dips in there. Yikes. All right. Well, you can already see our little lines are gone. And let me show you what happens. So we're going to go ahead and cut this out. Let the computer do its thing, yada, yada, yada. And now we have very positive looking, no indent cutout for our corners. Okay. Looks pretty good. Okay. So let's go ahead and save these. And then we'll move to the actual machining process, and I'll show you what that's like. All right, so here we go. We've got our female piece, our male piece, or our positive end, negative and positive, and I cut it down just for demonstration purposes. I'm going to show you what this looks like even without glue. This one doesn't have glue, neither does this one. Neither of these have glue in them, but I want to show you how tight this actually is and how well it stays even without glue, because if you do the vectoric way of doing things, right, which is, if you remember, it's this one that had this, huge gap in it. It doesn't want to stay. It won't want to stay on its own. The friction alone won't keep it there. So this one will, even without glue. So we're gonna just line it up. You will actually feel it click into place. So there's actually like a little click. There it is. See, I didn't even push that hard. But to get it just to fully seat on me, just gonna give it a little tappa. Okay, now that's forced itself in there. Notice our very, very thin gap. Let's take it over to the sander and show you exactly what I mean. And there you have it. It's really just kind of that easy. There's no glue in here at all. And look at this. There's no way to get this thing out. So you can see how easy that was, and it just kind of clicks right into place. And you can imagine when you put glue in here, it will expand a little bit with the moisture from both woods. Now this is maple and this is oak, so both very hard woods that I was using, including this Purple Heart example that I was showing you. And if you made it this far in the video, I prioritize the comments that come in. So if you made it this far, there's a secret word, and the secret word is stars. So start your comment with stars, and I will make sure to get to your comments first, and then the rest of them I'll get to them kind of whenever I get to them. So anyway, glad you stuck with it. Hope this was helpful, and yeah, like, subscribe, feed that pesky algorithm, and go out and make it a great day, I guess.